All right, let's jump into some Twitter questions. Like you said, we have a couple left over from last week. Not as many as typical, but
we'll get back
some good ones.
Full throttle next pod.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, maybe, I don't know. I haven't talked to you about this, Chris. I don't think we'll do one Friday. I don't know what your schedule's looking like. Probably not. We'll probably stick to early next week. But, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens this.
All right, we're going to kick off with an in-depth one from JJ. Colts strategy can be formulated based on these assumptions. A, the Colts have average or close to average talent. Many outsiders don't view many Colts as elite. B, many locals think the Colts are loaded with talent and few rookies will crack the starting lineup. Belief in A or B affects the approach. Which do you think the Colts believe, and which do you believe?
Well, I think the Colts probably think B. I think they've got solid talent. I think they've got good depth. But as I've said before, I need to see kind of the upper echelon talent. Like DeForest Buckner, you got to be an all-pro without Nick Bosa and without Eric Armstead next to you. Like, that's a big deal. But I also would agree with B in the sense of I don't expect many rookies to crack the lineup. I don't. Like, I am steadfast in saying, tell me where the rookies are going to play besides Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor. Julian Blackmon, okay, we'll see when he gets back off the whatever list he's on right now. Yeah, I mean that's a legit question of what his playing time will look like, but outside of Taylor and Pittman, I just don't think rookies are going to play a lot. Depth has gotten better. Are you elite enough to do something in January? That's a fair question, JJ.
This one's from Paul. Paul's biggest fear is that in a year without OTAs and team conditioning work, we're going to see a lot more than usual of serious football injuries in training camp. What's the return to real football in training camp after months of no football look like?
Yeah, Paul, I think you're spot on there. It kind of gets into what I said earlier about you're not putting on full pads till mid-August. I mean, that's unheard of in the NFL. Unheard of. Mm-hmm. And I know we've touched on this on prior podcasts, Chris, but we can go play pickup 5-on-5 at LA Fitness. NBA guys could do that if they wanted to. Yes, some restrictions on it, but you can still mimic that in practice. Phillip Rivers will not throw one pass outside of a red jersey until September 13th. Joe Burrow won't do that either. And I know some people will be like, well, Rivers didn't play in the preseason last year. Yes, that's true. Rivers has typically played in the preseason and actually played a decent amount. And I don't know, Phillip, but I would guess he'd like to play a little bit, or at least he strikes me as a guy that's like, yeah, I'm good with taking the red jersey off and just getting in some sort of real live period. Look, every guy's fighting to make the team, but Ryan Kelly and Grover Stewart, at the end of the day, they still are wearing the same color jerseys, and they're not pissed off at each other after 15 snaps and being like, mother bleeper, and it lead to some intense post-snap extracurriculars. So those are kind of all aspects of it of, do we see some awkward, sluggish moments early in the season? Do we see that?
Yeah.
I think it's a fair question.
It is. Before we get into Mac's question, he wanted to just share a little funny story first.
All right.
So him and his dad laughed during the draft because when they took Jonathan Taylor, obviously his name is Mac, his sister's name is Taylor, so now it's an all-time coincidence.
Oh, I got that. That is pretty good.
Yeah.
I actually Mac Taylor sounds like if you combine those names, that's a hell of a name.
Yeah,
you talk about a good fullback for Navy.
Oh, yeah.
Mac Taylor. I love it.
But his question is, do you fear the Jaguars grabbing Trevor Lawrence next year and us falling far behind the 8 ball and having a top 10 quarterback for the next 3 to 5 seasons?
Well, I mean, that's a bit doom and gloom, Mac. Part of me thinks the Jaguars will screw it up. Somehow they'll screw it up. Well, I think they should have the number 1 overall pick. I mean, I don't know. Hell, Jacksonville typically beats the Colts like once a season. I don't know. Could they factor into winning a couple of games? I don't know. Jacksonville's weird.
They are weird.
But I think there is something you said for okay, Houston has their guy. Jacksonville has their guy. Tennessee, it's not the same sort of thing, but like they kind of have their guy, and the Colts are now where those other teams used to be in the AFC South. The Colts used to always have their guy. So I do think there's something to be said for that. But I'm not like, there are still a couple of hurdles to clear, I think, before Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence, ideal marriage, 10-win season, falling out of bed sort of thing.
Quickly, to that point, before we came on the pod, speaking of Tennessee, did you see they're potentially close to a deal with Clowney?
Really? No, I have not seen. I mean, I was hosting today, so I haven't been perusing as much as usual.
I didn't dive into it or see who tweeted it because I was finishing up a work project, but I saw that they're potentially coming close to terms.
Really? What? Well, I mean, that would be big news. They seem to be a team that was always kind of one of them in the mix. Seattle even going back there, but I feel like Tennessee was one of the more popular teams, and John Robinson and Mike Vrabel have both commented on it publicly. That would be interesting for sure.
Let's jump back into it with the question from Steven. Robert Windsor has the braggadocious of a much higher draft pick, very brash. But can this kid actually be something? Have you seen much tape on him?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly watched tape on Rob, and what you see is a really quick first step for a man his size. And you see the number one trait that Matt Eberflus probably wants for his defensive linemen and anybody that plays defense for him. And that's not like cliche stuff. Like, that is legit why he was on the Colts board where he was. I'm curious about his size, Chris. He's not like Grover Stewart big.
Mm-hmm.
He's 290, so can he be the backup behind Grover? Is that Sheldon Day? I don't know if he's like your ideal 3 technique. I know a lot of people have said, like, let's debate him or Tyquan Lewis for the first spot, or for that final spot, I should say, in the defensive line group. Doing the Zoom call with him, I thought he was going to jump through the screen at me. I mean, he comes off as, I'm going to kick your ass sort of guy, which you obviously like in a defensive lineman. But, yeah, I wouldn't expect anything more than a rotational guy as a rookie. If he makes the team, I think there is debate on that.
Fun one from Joseph this week. Which 2 Colts would make the best tag team in the WWE, and which Colt would be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC? Loves the podcast. Go Colts. Go Dogs.
Oh, boy. Go Dogs. Go Dogs. Joseph, are we thinking Bulldog? Georgia Bulldog? Butler Bulldog? What are we thinking there?
I know we've had a Georgia question before.
Maybe it's him.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 Colts would be the best tag team in WWE, and which Colt would be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC? Great questions. WWE, Chris, I'm not a diehard. I don't know if you are.
No, it was one of those growing up. I think most young guys have that stage of their life. Like I watched it when I was younger.
Big, thick bodies, right? Isn't that kind of like, you don't have many small WWE wrestlers, do
I think it depends. Like Rey Mysterio was really small and like would sling through the ropes, so he was one of my favorites growing up.
Okay, all right, that's fair.
And with a tag team, you can kind of have 2 different sizes. Like they kind of feed off of each other, so they don't always have to be the same
big
size.
burly. Okay, that's fair. I mean, this is the cop-out. I just think Nelson and Leonard, I think their personalities are actually pretty like WWE-ish. Like you could make something out of that. Is Charlie Arnold still on the WWE? Do you know who that is?
A local reporter from here.
Right, and then changed her last name.
Was Charlie Arnold her name here or when she got to the WWE?
It was her name here. She went to North Central. She changed it to something.
I don't know.
What's the
you know who would know? Darius Leonard. Darius Leonard is a big wrestling fan.
Cheeks, what's the Lakers guard, the white dude? Caruso. That's her last name.
Okay,
that's her stage name.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, oh boy, we're really offbeat. Okay, pound for pound fighter in the UFC.
WWE, right? It was WWE start and then UFC.
Yeah, now we're on to UFC. Pound for pound fighter. I think Rock Yassin. I mean, 2-time wrestling state champ in Georgia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously UFC has all different weight classes. I mean, Kenny Moore would probably scrap well. But that's it. I mean, I think you need like a very fit. I don't know about you, but I feel like in high school, like our best wrestlers were like linebackers or safeties on the football team, like that kind of body type transition. So yeah, I'll go with Rock.
Colts Mexico. How is the NFL going to deal with the coaches and COVID? He just cannot get his head around a 70-plus-year-old coach and a millionaire also getting in planes and locker rooms with a bunch of 20-year-old millionaire athletes. There's just no way.
Yeah, I mean, Colts Mexico, this is a very fair question and something that we have not really talked about. I know Bruce Arians has been, speaking out a little bit about a cancer survivor and that. Couple things come to mind. You don't see NFL coaches going into locker rooms very often. After games, yes, but during the week, no. Like, they're kind of just in their meeting room. Mm-hmm. And now the question is, are NFL meeting rooms virtual? When you walk into that meeting room, do you immediately go to the third row of the meeting room so you're never within, 6 feet of that coach? I think those are very real questions. On the practice field, is a coach wearing a mask? That's fair. I saw an interview, because I'm a dad now, I know, I watch the nightly news. Dave Calabro was at Mount Vernon. The old Ben Davis coach is over there, Kirchner, and he's talking about how he's not as hands-on with the high school players as he used to be. Are you not as hands-on? In the NFL, some coaches are a little bit more hands-on than others, but, you can still stand 6 feet away. But, yeah, it's not like you have a union for coaches that you hear about as much as, like, the Players Association.
Exactly, yeah.
Very fair question. I don't have a great answer for you, Colts Mexico. Do you keep your higher risk coaches up in the booth? Is that a change that you make? This is on the list of things to worry about. It's probably not as high as we should maybe put it. Yeah, those are some of my thoughts to it. The biggest thing is obviously getting on planes. Now, for what it's worth, when I used to travel, I think it used to be players would get on in the back of the plane. They'd sit in the back. Coaches would then get on the front, and staff members, they'd sit in the front, and you'd never interact. Now, things can pass a little bit more via plane, obviously. I'm not an idiot. The Miami Marlins are probably an example of that. But, yeah, those are some of my general thoughts on it.
From Carter, he saw the video of Kemoko Turay on the Colts Instagram page, and his first thoughts was this has to be fast-forwarded. He knows it wasn't, but it looked really good. What is a realistic stat line for the 2020 seasons for Turay that includes sacks, hurries, tackles for losses, and games played?
I might have missed the Instagram. Do you know if it was like him and Robert Mathis training?
I saw him and Robert doing a lot of hand work this week.
Hand fighting stuff.
And it is quick. It's one of those where it's like, how do you even... They obviously know what they're doing, but they were moving very fast.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm just trying to carry all the bags of groceries in from the car in one trip. That's all I care about with the hand fighting. I think the last part of that question is the most important. What is a realistic stat line for the 2020 season for Turay, including sacks, hurries, TFLs, and games played? Yeah, it all comes out of the last part. I think if he's on the field, he's going to produce, and probably more so in the sacks and hurries. Tackles for loss, it's more of an early down run stat, making plays in the backfield than it is a outright pass rushing stat. Because, I'm curious, like, what those waves, they always talk about playing in waves up front, a lot of rotating. Is Turay going to have the opportunity for a lot of tackles for loss?
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah, I think, but sacks and hurries are real. So I'll always have he battled the weight issue as a rookie. He had the neck thing. Like, if you handed Frank Reich, will play 13 games this year, he might say yes right now. If you handed Frank Reich Kemoko Turay's going to play 13 games for you, I think you sign it. I think you sign it right now. And if he plays 13 games, I'm going to say... 8.5 sacks. That might be a hair high on the over-under. I think that's fair. And the hurries, you'd probably double. You'd probably double those sacks. TFLs, again, I'm not as high on that, but still. There's probably not a more intriguing player gauging fans' interest than Turay this season.
And that's what I was saying going back to the beginning of the podcast. Like, in terms of my excitement for the defense, there's some questions that if they get answered a certain way, I'm going to be through the roof excited.
Yeah. And there's positions that every fan base falls in love with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we adore the punter in this town. We adore the quarterback, obviously. We have an affinity for pass rushers because of Dwight and Roberts. So getting to that next one and it not being Bjorn Werner, yeah, that's the goal.
This week from Trenton, the Colts have, in his opinion, the strongest roster from 1 to 53, but lack the top-end star talent that the other teams do. However, with the unpredictability this season with COVID, where you will see teams lose some star players 4 weeks at a time, could that possibly give the Colts an edge in some games this season?
Yeah. Who was this? Was this Trenton?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. I guess that makes sense. You know, I to be honest with you, I haven't given that like too much thought. Yeah, I mean, like if you lose your star player, it just got really dark outside.
Yeah,
man.
dude.
Gosh, great. This will be awesome. You know, it's something to the effect of like, I guess Trent's right. You know, losing your star players would be like Houston. If Houston loses Watt and Watson, that's a huge blow. If the Colts lose Rivers and Buckner, yeah, it's a big blow, but do they have the run game to kind of, I don't know, make up for it if it would be Colts and Texans that week? That's one way to look at it. So, yeah, that is that's a fair way, Trenton. And I guess I probably need to take a closer look at just where does the Colts' depth compare to everyone else in the league.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty good. I do.
Too.
It's going to be, man, this is going to be weird. It's going to be fascinating. Fascinating.
Well, speaking of fascinating, we got a great question from Stan. One that made me laugh. I actually shared it with some coworkers before coming on here. He says, I know that it is far, far too early to ask you to react to the 2021 quarterbacks, but to simplify things, if you couldn't get Andrew Luck Pepsi, which he thinks is Trevor Lawrence, would you rather get Diet Deshaun Watson, Justin Fields, or Andrew Luck Zero, Trey Lance?
Look at this. How creative is this? Read those all. And I'm not a very soda, pop, whatever people call it. I really don't drink them at all. But rattle those off again, okay?
So he's comparing Andrew Luck Pepsi to Trevor Lawrence. So Pepsi's obviously high on Stan's list of carbonated beverages.
Yeah.
Diet Deshaun Watson, who would be Justin Fields.
Gotcha.
Or Andrew Luck Zero, Trey Lance.
Wow. That's interesting. Trey Lance, I would assume our listeners are diehard enough. They probably heard the name. He's the North Dakota State quarterback that people are obsessed with right now. Didn't throw an interception last year in college football. Chris, I don't care if you're playing at Hanover. That's a notable stat.
Yep.
Like,
oh, yeah.
How do you not just have one? This is wild. Why do you think Trevor Lawrence is impossible to get? Isn't he going 1 overall? Like, he's going to be number 1 pick.
Yeah.
The Colts are not going to be that bad. God, if they are. Oof. And then they're not going to be able to trade up for that. So I can't go there. I probably like the Andrew Luck Zero Trey Lance. Oh boy, big hiccup.
Based on how our offense is built already, with Fields coming in.
That's a good way to look at it. I like running quarterbacks. I like quarterbacks that can make some things happen with their feet. I don't know if I like them. Deshaun Watson has got no fear with his body.
Mm-mm.
No fear, which is so commendable, so respectable. But I'm just kind of like, oh, man. Ugh. Jeez, is that guy going to make it? Who's their backup, AJ McCarron? I mean, like, you know, that's kind of the feeling I have when I watch the Texans. I watched Justin Fields a decent amount last year. I don't think I have the same sort. I don't think he runs that much.
He doesn't. He gets portrayed as a mobile quarterback, I think, just because he's a black athlete. But
right.
he's actually is a very good pocket passer. And going back to your interception comment, I think until one of the later games, and I could check, he didn't have an interception thrown either.
Fields,
yeah,
which is
and
damn impressive
for playing in the Big Ten.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess Lance is kind of more of your pro system, and Carson Wentz and Easton Stick, I think, is the other North Dakota State quarterback in the league, like that sort of thing. Lance is intriguing. I'm all about intriguing. I'm all about curious. I need to watch North Dakota State, whatever conference you're in. Please play football this year. Let's get Notre Dame and North Dakota State to play a game.
They're in an area of the country that's pretty socially distant. They should
right.
be all right.
You're right. I think they're in Butler. They've played Butler. I'm pretty sure they're in Butler's conference.
Really?
Yeah. Almost, which I saw something come across my timeline today. Who would have tweeted about that? Probably Rakestraw.
Yeah, that's a good guess.
About Butler football. Let me see if I can find this.
Okay. All right. Well, Stan's question wraps up this week's Twitter questions for the podcast.
Love it. Thank you, Stan. Appreciate that. Good to have you back. Shorter pod this week. Like I said, we should hear from Chris Ballard at some point this week. I think maybe Friday is the thought process. Maybe on a Friday pod. That's a strong maybe. We'll see. But if not, or early next week to come back and kind of go over what Ballard had to say. And we'll start to get into some Zoom-type stuff with the Colts here. Start next week.
Love it.
All right, man. He's Chris Presley. Cheeks in studio as well. I'm Kevin Bowen. Appreciate y'all for listening to this edition of Kevin's Corner. If you have any questions, you know where to find me. Don't hesitate to reach out. And everybody have a great week. And we'll be back at some point with another edition of Kevin's Corner.